Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Inept General, and welcome to our look at a recently released video by Creative Assembly at the Dark Elf campaign. We'll just go over it together and talk about a little bit of my impressions of some of the mechanics we've seen so far, and my thoughts on how they might work for the Dark Elves. So let's kick things off, shall we?
Hello everybody, and welcome to our first campaign video for Total War Warhammer 2. Today we're going to be taking a look at a few turns of campaign gameplay in the still somewhat early turns of a Dark Elves campaign led by Malekith the Witch King. So if we pull back and take a look at the overview map, we can get...
Now I do think the world map looks pretty great, even sort of zoomed out, and it does look like a huge area, and it kind of does feel like that. For the turns I've managed to have with my time playing as the Skaven campaign, got through a few hours of it and really hadn't gotten out of my little corner of the world, so it is very much kind of on the scale that this would be a huge overall arcing map, and it will take you a while to get around the entirety of the Vortex map.
I decided to send Malekith with a large invasion force south to Ulthuan to form a sort of territorial beachhead and slow down the High Elves who were ahead in the race for control of the Vortex. I chose to land here, at Vol's Anvil. Now just a quick word for those of you who don't know, Vol's Anvil that we see here is actually a very historically important place to the High Elves, and I suppose to the Dark Elves as well, to a certain extent, because it goes back to the point where it says shared history, and Vol's Anvil's where the finest of the elven weapons are forged, so there'll probably be some kind of special building here, one would imagine. It's one of a few special locations on the map because it's a ritual resource site, meaning that it has the potential to produce ritual currency each turn. Ritual currency is what's needed to perform rituals, each one bringing you closer to control of the Great Vortex and ultimate victory.
Now we see for the Dark Elves, their ritual currency is very different than the Skaven one, which you guys may have seen on my previous video for the Skaven campaign that I had a look over. But for the Dark Elves, it looks like their one is Scrolls of Hepharti. Now Hepharti is, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right or not, I'm probably not, but she is the elven goddess of conjuration, so kind of something in magics, and she has a twin sister called Aphrati, who is the elven goddess of pleasure, and it's these two goddesses kind of vying against each other that really has the attention of Morathi, the mother of Malekith, king of the Dark Elves. Now that's because she loves all the pleasurable stuff in life, but also is a very powerful magic user. Now this particular goddess, whose scrolls you're collecting to complete these rituals, is very much attuned to magic and the winds of magic. She's said to see all the winds of magic. She has 6 arms as well. In each of these arms, she's said to carry a relic that's tied to her. In one hand, there's a serpent-headed staff, another, a beating heart, a scorpion, a broken arrow, a serrated dagger, and a vial of orphan tears are amongst the stuff that she carries around with her with all her multitude of arms. Now she has a very jealous relationship with her sister, and that's why Morathi in particular takes very good care to praise both of these goddesses in turn. As for both of them, Morathi's kind of like their #1 go-to lady. So that's kind of who and what you're collecting to carry out the rituals. Now the rituals we've spoken about quite a lot in terms of carrying out these rituals gets you to the end target and is really the final goal for Total War Warhammer 2.
We're not alone in this race for control, however. At any time you can check the progress of the other races.
I do like this touch that you can check the progress of the other races as you go along.
Just slightly behind, while Skaven and Lizardmen are playing catch-up. Now normally ritual currency is earned by completing missions, so finding sites that let you generate currency each turn is highly valuable and sought after by all the races.
Now here you're building a tomb to Hepharti. I'm not sure that's not really lore-wise. I think lore-wise there's only one small temple to her, and that's in the Dark Covenant in, I think, Morathi's home territory.
Stealing Vol's Anvil from the High Elves both speeds us up and slows them down. However, the High Elves are still progressing, and just 5 turns ago they've begun their second ritual. Their capital of Lothern, as well as 2 currently hidden settlements, are channeling energy towards the Vortex as they complete their ritual over the course of 10 turns. During this time, we can disrupt them by taking out any of these settlements. We can also see that the Lizardmen have sent an intervention force against Lothern, but it doesn't look like it'll be enough to slow them down. The High Elves are defending their capital well, so we'll be looking to find a lesser defended settlement to capture and interrupt their ritual. So that'll be our objective for this Let's Play. Interrupt the ritual within 5 turns to delay the High Elves and let us take the lead in the race. If we take a look at Malekith, We can see that he's become quite battle-hardened over the last 70 or so turns.
Now I like this new like detail tree of the lords and legendary lords. I like that they've taken the thing from Bretonnia where they explain out all the traits that you've got, and I like this new layout down here where you can see yourself going up the traits tree to the point where you can see how far up, if you've maxed out that trait or not, what you need to do to maybe max out that trait, and you can kind of chase them down their line rather than them just having a bit more randomly to you. You can actually see what you're doing, and you can carve out your traits a little bit better. So I really do like that aspect of it. I like the layout, and I like the moving up the traits tree there. I think it all looks really good.
Leveling up his traits and capturing himself a high elf slave for his own personal use. For his skill.
Now looking at this upgrade tree, it's kind of interesting, but nothing we've really not seen before. If you guys haven't seen it, do check out my Dark Elf and Skaven stat comparison video. I go into all of these spells and what they do for Malekith, as well as some of his other attributes. So do check that out, popping up in the right hand corner now, or you'll find a link down in the description below. We do get a look at some of his other traits, but for the most part, it looks like he will be getting a couple of upgrades, mainly sort of melee focused, leadership focused. But let's take a look at a few that were revealed during this video. First up, we have the Supreme Spell Shield, which looks like gives +8 melee defense, +20 magic resistance, -2 for the cost of Doombolt, and -2 for the upgraded Doombolt. Enemy hero action -10, and passive ability Supreme Shield, which is a Hex of Winds, constant around self, targets enemies in range. Effect increases proportional to the number of enemy units in range, decrease to power reserves. So if you manage to swarm down on an enemy sorcerer or near an enemy sorcerer, I'm guessing within 40 meters of one, and get yourself surrounded by enemy units, you'll greatly decrease the rate at which they have the amount of winds of magic they have access to. I'm guessing that's what that is. It's a bit of a strange one, but interesting. Yeah, so I'm guessing that's what that ability is. Next up we have a few spells, but I think we can skip past them. And then we have Raid Leader, which seems to be a charge bonus for Shades and Dark Riders. But if you guys want to have a look at the magic stuff in a bit more detail, I recommend you check out that stats video, as I mentioned before. I go through all the magic spells that Malekith has at his disposal, and you'll see a bit more detail on that there.
And with over 100 different slots to fill, you can really invest in the chains you want and create your unique Malekith that suits your playstyle or his character.
And sorry guys there, it was mentioned that Legendary Lords can now go to level 40, which is actually great, especially considering now that magic comes with an additional cost and a whole bunch of other things as well. But level 40 Legendary Lords is pretty good.
Malekith's army is recovering from the battle at Val's Anvil a few turns ago, but we're traveling with a Black Ark, a sort of roaming naval carrier that can build and recruit units, replenish forces, and call in bombardment support.
Now I just want to talk about the Black Arks a little bit, guys. As we can see, they're kind of floating cities. They have their own building chains, they have their own troops. Now this will make them incredibly hard to fight, particularly if they have an army going around with them in support. So you're going to need a lot of stacks to bring one of these bad boys down, and they're incredibly useful. We're about to see some of their stances that they can do. I've already spoken about their bombardment skill, which I'm sure we're going to see in the battle video tomorrow for the Dark Elves, whereby if you park the Black Ark near enough, the idea being that the Black Ark can actually bombard the battle that you're fighting in as the Dark Elves. So you'll get a bombardment ability that you can use a couple of times in that battle. All in all, it really is looking pretty good for the Dark Elves and the Black Arks, and I think they will be formidable aspects to play during the game, and will make a very interesting sort of campaign tool stroke mechanic as you go through your campaign as the Dark Elves, and they're very hard and something that must be dealt with if you're playing against the Dark Elves.
Time is of the essence, so we'll need to enable full speed and get as far up the coast as we can. We'll move our Black Ark up to reinforce Malekith, switching to Dredd Expansion stance to make sure his army is replenishing.
So as we can see, very much the area of effect of a Black Ark, as you see this dotted yellow line around them there. Not the kind of nearest one, but the one a little bit further, I think, is the range of the Black Ark. Now let's have a look at Dredd Expansion stance. Any armies within the Black Ark sphere of influence may recruit units directly from it. That's pretty great. Casualty replenishment rate plus 10% for any armies within the Black Ark sphere of influence. The Black Ark itself replenishes more slowly. So more of a supporting the troops on the ground rather than necessarily buffing up your own troops off the shore. So that looks like a great little supporting object, I guess. I've had a very hard time describing how you would sort of describe the Black Ark, because there's no other unit like it at the moment in Total War Warhammer 2, but looks like it can be a very handy unit to have in support of any invasion you do.
Back to our home province of Nagarond, we have some business to attend to. We've just received a message from Felicion asking us to attack the rogue army of the Mangy Hounds. Rogue armies can be comprised of a mishmash of troops from different races, and usually seek to raid until they have enough income to find a home of their own. They owe no allegiance to anyone, which means they have no friends to help them, so let's end them swiftly. We'll get our Dreadlord Velavith to declare war and attack. Looks like they're trying to run away, but they're essentially cornered on the coast. Seeing that their doom is inevitable, I'm going to grab our Knight Assassin and get her to join the army. She's only a level 2, but...
I also really like this change, guys. As you can see with the hero kind of pop-up screen, you can see the abilities they have for the campaign map, how good they are at it, and what they can do. So it's a good way of just getting a glance at what your heroes are able to do just by quickly looking over, rather than having to go into their skill tree to remind you. And I really like the layout of it, and I think it looks really good. You'll also notice here on the cities of particularly Nagarond, the climate tab for them has changed. That's kind of an icy tundra tab. So just bear that one in mind when you are campaigning and conquering different lands. At the climate tabs, you want to have a check at and see if your armies are suited to those areas.
Already has the scavenge ability, allowing her to pick the battlefield clean after a fight and increase the amount of post-battle loot we get.
Cruelty and violence. For Nagaroth, for victory!
Alright, so an easy battle, we've got our little bit of loot, and it looks like we've ranked up too. Let's enslave the
Here we just see the enslave post-battle stance to increase your number of slaves, send them back, but we'll get to that a bit more detail later in this video.
Hands are no more. If we check out Velavith's skill tree, we can see that we can now decide her name of
Names of power, which is a way of having your Dark Elf generals be able to specialize in certain areas. I think the first one is their own combat skill, second one is their army's combat skill, and the third one is the province and the faction as a whole. Went for faction as a whole, got a couple of upgrades here. It's a nice way of distinguishing your generals and making them slightly different from one another.
Could do with recruiting a few units for her as well, so we'll grab some bleak swords to bolster our home defense. Cyrus Barbstorm and her army is on the way to sack Blacklight Tower, belonging to the Forge Band, and it looks like there's an encounter at sea on the way, so let's explore it. Ah, we found some sunken booty. This will give us growth and extra income across all of our regions for a short while. Definitely a good omen for...
As we can see the benefits of some of these treasures. Now, I've spoken about this in some of my previous videos, but it really does add a different element to your early game in particular. As you saw there, that was plus 30 growth, which could be huge very early on. So what you kind of want to do is almost like Civilization, send out maybe one general of just a couple of units just to go around collecting these, and it really will have a huge benefit for your faction as a whole as it grows, particularly in the early game. And if the AI gets a bit more aggressive at picking them up themselves, it's also something you want to beat the AI to so they don't get those benefits.
Cyrus's journey to come, no doubt. And on that note, it's time to end the turn. Now, new to the Total War franchise is the ability to decide what you want to see during the end turn phase. Currently, we're watching...
Now, I think this is a great new addition, guys. The ability to kind of handpick what you want to see, at what speed you want to see it as you go through the turns. And I think particularly if we come to the combined map, once it's out after release, this will come into play even more so as you go through more and more and more and more factions. But I like it. It's a nice little touch. It's a good little addition to Total War Warhammer 2.
A Tyrannoc hero perform an action against an ally of mine. Something that's not particularly of cause for concern for me, so we can choose to speed this up ignore it, change the camera view, and more, and we could do this for all factions or groups of factions, like all of our allies or all of our enemies. As we are at war with Tiranoc, we'll skip what its heroes are doing, but pay attention to its lords, just in case an army comes our way. Draklakoven. A one-settlement Dark Elf faction is asking for peace. I think you know my answer. Looks like the Forge Band know what's coming their way, and there's nothing they can do to stop it. So, our Sacrifice of Cain rite is ready to be used again, and just in perfect time. Rites are a new feature in Total War Warhammer 2, which can be performed by each race.
So let's have a look at the Dark Elf rites. If you guys have seen my Skaven campaign impressions video, or if you haven't, check the top right hand corner now or the description below. But each race has different rites. Now my Skaven ones are covered in that video, but let's have a look at the Dark Elf ones here. Sacrifice to Afari, the goddess of pleasure. On turn start, Lord has a chance to gain loyalty, +4 public order. That's alright. As you can see, guys, I think that requires 250 slaves. Now, slaves is the currency by which rites can be performed. And again, like with the Skaven, which I think the rites for the Skaven is food, a lot of these races have secondary currencies that they use for things like rites and for other benefits in the campaign as well. The next one, Sacrifice to Hekarati, is the experience for sorceresses, experience per turn for sorceresses, Winds of Magic +30, all magic focused. We spoke about that goddess a little bit earlier. Sacrifice to Cain, the elven god of murder, victims of gain that go casualty replenishment. That seems all battle focused. +20 casualty replenishment, income from slaves, slaves decline rate. That's because you're murdering more of your slaves. Income from post-battle loot +50%. Army ability, the Dark Conduit. Interesting. Have no idea what that is as of yet. And the Sacrifice to Mathlan. Now, a Dark Ark will become available to be recruited from any port settlement. Yes, a free Black Ark. I imagine they're pretty expensive to get, but once you can get one, that must be pretty great. So, yeah, pretty good rights. I think they show the sort of faction in a good light and a good reflection of it. But let's continue with the video.
For the Dark Elves, we can sacrifice slaves in order to get effects in our campaign. This is how Black Arks are recruited, for example, which we can't get another one for a little while yet, but we can perform a Sacrifice to Cain, which, considering we have a few battles coming up, will be a good idea as we'll capture more slaves from those battles. Great, now that the rite is activated, let's figure out how we're going to deal with the slaves we're about to capture.
Guys, this screen answers a lot of questions about how slaves are going to be used by the Dark Elves. Actually, it kind of answers all of them. So it took me a little while to make sense of it the first time I saw it. But on the right-hand side, we have the effects of slaves. So we have the public order effect they're having, and we have the income effect they're having. So as you can see, the Chill Road has making 17 income from the 52 slaves they have there. Nagorond is making 67 income from the slaves they have there, and at the moment, with the level of slaves they have, it's not causing any negative public order effects, as we can see by the right-hand column. Now, slaves also die out. Slaves just die. They don't last very long. So we can see the different rates at which the slaves are dying in each city. And so the idea is you keep having to replenish them. You keep having to go out and get more because the slaves will die at a continuous rate. They won't be self-propagating. Now, what this rate is controlled by, we still don't know. I imagine it's probably buildings, certain faction bonuses, stuff like that will affect the rate at which your slaves decline. But as you can see, the slaves here haven't reached anywhere near the full capacity of the amount of slaves able to be taken up by any individual city. Sort of 12,000 capacity in Nagron, 12,000 capacity in Iron Mountains. So you can get a lot of slaves, and thus you can get the impression that a lot of this income bonus could be quite huge if you're bringing back enough slaves to Nagorond or any of the other cities. So that is actually really interesting. So Apart from being able to, of course, be used for rites, not rituals, those are two different things, don't forget. To be able to use for rites, such as summoning that black arc, or getting bonuses to battle casualty replenishment, you can also use slaves just to straight up make money. And as we're about to see, you can move the slaves around and decide where you want to send slaves to manage your public order a little bit better and just to get the maximum benefit. So it's a nice little management system in there for the slavery system.
Slave screen, we can see all of the provinces we currently have control over, their current slaves, and how full they are. The more slaves we have, the more money we make, but too many slaves can cause negative public order and lead to rebellions. You can construct buildings in regions to increase the amount you can take, reduce their decline rates, and increase the money they make, so there's a nice balance to be struck with provinces with high public order you may want to gear towards slaves, versus provinces with low public order, perhaps due to climate, that you might not want to send slaves. So currently we don't have very many at all, and Nagorond is doing fantastic with buildings ready to put the slaves to work, so let's set it to a high priority and stop the influx of slaves in our other provinces for now. With that done, let's march on Blacklight Tower. Looks like we've caught them off guard as the Forge Band's north is completely undefended, probably why they asked us for peace. We'll sack the town to take the most slaves we can and come back later after we deal with their armies. So now we've just gained 600 slaves, and they've been sent straight to Nagorond.
And here we can see the kind of earning potential from taking slaves can get you.
Moving back over to Velovith, it looks like there's another treasure hunt for us to complete, so let's check it out. Nice. It's always worth checking out those encounters at sea, because they often have great bonuses or gear that you can use later on in your campaigns and battles. Okay, back to the main task at hand. Let's head back down to Malekith. I'll take you along the path he originally took. Now it's covered with storms, treacherous whirlpools, and roaming armies, so you can see that he had quite the journey getting here, and this isn't even halfway down the map. Now let's disembark his army and scout ahead to see what the High Elves have in store for us. Okay, it looks like they've actually got a very well defended settlement here, no doubt protecting it while they perform their ritual. We've got another turn before we can actually reach it, and we're still...
Now that's a lot of building slots for the Black Ark
so
there.
Malekith's army is healing.
They will be, once built up, very, very dangerous indeed.
Even better units later down the line. Now, a small concern I have is that the Lizardmen will fail at Lothern, and they'll send their other army towards me from the rear, pinning me in this forest. So, to ensure that the High Elves are kept busy, we'll call upon an intervention force.
Now, we've spoken about intervention forces in my previous Skaven campaign video, but this is the screen that gives you a bit more of an idea about how they work and the costs involved. The idea here being that sometimes a race like the Lizardmen might be really far from you, particularly if you're like the High Elves or something like that. And so for you to stand a chance of maybe being able to interrupt their rituals, there's this intercept army mechanic where you can just pay for effectively an AI-controlled mercenary army to go after the ritual, one of the ritual cities, and try and take it down to stop any AI factions getting to do the rituals.
Now, intervention forces can only be called upon when an enemy ritual is in progress. This is like a mercenary-style AI army that will do the best to hinder and prevent the enemy's ritual from completing. We can get 3 tiers of intervention, so we'll get the highest tier army. Excellent. So we can see the army is a full stack made up of a decent selection of troops, and some costly high tier units too. Hopefully this will distract the High Elves long enough for us to take Cairnthal. So with that, let's end the turn. Looks like my intervention force has just destroyed Glittering Tower, probably because the Lizardmen are still sieging Lothern for themselves. And it looks like we're ready to perform our own ritual. We're finally catching up with the High Elves. So performing this ritual will take 10 turns, give us 5,000 gold, and it means we'll need to protect Nagorond, Har Kaldra, and Kalira, our strongest settlements. So let's begin.
The ritual is underway, my lord. Even working together, it will take your greatest adepts some time to complete. Such is the ritual's power that the great vortex itself distorts under its pull. Be wary, though, for while the vortex is weakened, the forces of chaos will slip into this world. Ready your defenses, for they will doubtless be drawn to the ritual's power.
Okay, so there's
The idea
chaos
here
armies
being
spawning
that
all over
chaos
the place,
armies will
so
kind of
better cover
spawn
armies back
to
defend
stop
their
you
own
doing
towns.
your ritual, as opposed to maybe enemy AI mercenary controlled factions.
Back to Ulthuan, let's push our Black Ark up to the coastline, ensuring that Malekith has our bombardment support, and finally attack Karn Thal, stopping the enemy ritual once and for all. I hate to leave it on a cliffhanger, but that'll be it for this campaign Let's Play. Be sure to join us tomorrow as we continue where we left off and fight the battle for Karn Thal.
Alright guys, that's about it for that video. On the whole, I think it looks really promising. I like the slavery mechanics that the Dark Elves have. The Dark Arcs, the Black Arcs, sorry, look very dangerous indeed if you can get them going up to full strength. So essentially the same as carrying around a full Wood Elf city with you as you go through the waters. So you can fully replenish your armies, a very powerful tool indeed. Hope you guys enjoyed my take on the video we saw earlier today. I know we saw stats for Bleak Swords and for Dark Shards, but there are a couple of units. You guys can check that out in this video. Just pause at the right time. Compare that to other units yourselves. Other than that, guys, as always, a huge thank you for watching, and I hope to catch you all on the next one.